Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really do appreciate it. Hope you come back often. Hope you tell your friends about us so they can also join us. Before we start the show, I want to introduce Father Ron Walters for the show's prayer. Father Walters, welcome.
As we create in miniature, O God, the world around us, may we marvel at the beauty and genius which created this world and instilled in us a portion of your great knowledge and wisdom. Give success to the work of our hands, O God. Amen.
Father, thank you so much for joining us this evening and offering us the prayer for the show. We really do appreciate all your great help. Now I want to introduce the sponsor for our show, Brennan's Model Railroading. It is Brennan.
For over 25 years, Brennan's Model Railroading has been offering unique products for the O-scale market. Our flagship product, Brennan's Better Ballast, was an instant hit and continues to be the industry leader. Its prototypical size and natural color blend of real crushed granite make it the choice for discerning modelers. Since then, we've developed a complementary line of natural ground cover materials. Additionally, we offer craftsman kits that anyone can build with complete photographically illustrated instructions that assume you've never done this before. The Sonky Wanky Coffee Company is the latest and the fourth kit to be added to our ongoing and highly popular limited edition Ellison Tribute series. These kits take Ellison's scratch-built iconic structures to a new level with Dennis spin. The idea being that if Frank were alive today, this is how we would build these models using modern methods and materials. Use the QR code to visit our website.
Well, now I want to talk just a few minutes about our scholarship program. As you know, July the 1st is the deadline to receive applications from young people for this year's scholarships. We're going to be announcing on July the 31st the three winners of our $2,000 scholarships, one of which was totally funded by the Pacific Coast region of the NMRA. And I'm so ever grateful for them for having the interest and the confidence in our program and participating how they have. So if you tune into our show on July the 31st, you'll be able to know who the winners were and meet them and have an opportunity to hear about them and what their modeling is like and to meet them. If you're still thinking about applying, you have a few more days. But as I say, our closeout is July the 1st. That's the last day. So if you haven't submitted your application and you're going to a college, university, or technical school to continue your education in a STEAM program, either science, technology, engineering, art, or math, send us in your application. And we wish you the best in your educational career. The next My Bill is on July the 24th. And Greg Cassidy is here this evening. Chris can't be with us, he's working. But Greg is here to talk about the upcoming My Bill. So Greg, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. I'll try to do Chris proud. So as Jim said, the next My Build on July 24th, this will be a free-for-all. We don't have any particular theme. We did have a lot of modelers show up for our water theme last week. And what I'd like to ask people to do is vote for who they thought had the best thematic approach to meeting the water modeling theme. And in order to do this, you need to go on to the Facebook page, the New Tracks Modeling Facebook page. And if you scroll down, you'll find a poll where you can vote for your favorite that presented something that met the ideology of the theme of the Water My Build last week. So if you're able to go to the Facebook page for New Tracks Modeling and vote for that, we'd like to get those votes in. And then the next My Build on July 24th, please try and get slides to Chris. We'd like to show a lot of what you're modeling. I know most people here are working on something. So just take a couple pictures of it and send them off to Chris. If you haven't done it before, send a picture of yourself as well so he can feature you as he's introducing you. You'll send them to his email at railrunner130@hotmail.com, like it says on the screen here. And I think that's about it, Jim.
Well, that's great. And next, let's see, the show on the 3rd of July, Chris will be announcing the winner of the who got the most votes for the model shown on our last show on the 19th of June. So make sure that you're here for that, and you'll find out the winner of the contest.
Jim and Greg, real quick, everybody look in the chat, and I'll put this over on the YouTube as well. There's the link to the page, and let me share with real quickly the page here. So hang on, I think I shared the wrong screen. Hang on, if you let me share the right screen. If you go on the page, this is what it'll look like when you go on there. Scroll down, and if you go down a ways, you'll see right here, and just vote right there on that line for the model that you want, the modeler that you think did the best job in water. Thanks, guys.
And notice they're not all showing there. There's a bar you can click on to show more at the bottom.
Yep. And make sure you find out. Make sure you find out all of the ones, because before we started the show tonight, in all of my great technological ability, I hit on one person's name and they went from first to last. So make sure that I don't deprive him from any votes. I apologize for that.
And on the page, by the way, there's a link, and if you click on that, there's a sheet that's got a picture of each model with the name of the modeler to pique your memory, so you remember what was there.
Okay, Phil, thank you so much. Greg, thank you so much, and we'll see you both on the 24th for the next the My Build. Well, you know, we've been doing this show now for over 4 years, and I've always believed that modeling is modeling. You can transfer the skills from any hobby. You can transfer your skills from any scale. And I believe that people in 3-rail, Lionel, or scale, O scale, or scale, S scale, or American Flyer, or high rail, S scale, are just as good a modelers as anybody in the world. So as you know, that we've had for some time now 2 segments for O scale, a regular O scale segment, and then we have had an O scale high rail segment. Well, for a while, I've been looking for a way to do the same thing with S scale. We've had the S scale segment for a while, but I didn't have another segment for the non-scale modelers in S scale. So I found out that what the association refers to non-scale modelers as is American Flyer / high rail. So then when I found that out, that became the name for the second segment on the show for S scale. And we've got it started now with the show that we had last time. And Joe Weber, who I ran across in one of the main clubs in St. Louis, agreed to be the host for this new segment. And when I talked to Joel about, well, I'd like to have a sponsor for this, who would you recommend? He said, well, there's only one company. It's American Models. He said, that's who you want to try to get to be the sponsor for this American Flyer / High Rail segment, even though this company is not limited to that because they produce scale as well as the other kinds of equipment. So I looked them up and got the telephone number, and I called and I talked to the lady who owns the company, Karen Bashiba. And Karen and I talked for a while and kind of hit it off. And so I said, well, Karen, how about you being the sponsor for this High Rail American Flyer segment on our shows? And she said that she would be happy to. And because of a mix-up between what I thought I was telling her and what I actually told her, she missed the other night. So I asked her to join us this evening, and I want to introduce her to you. This is the owner of American Models, who, from everybody that I have talked to in the hobby, if you're an S-scale modeler, an American Flyer or High Rail modeler, American Models is the first call that you should make. So Karen, welcome. Thank you so much for being a sponsor for this segment. And love for you to take a few minutes and tell us about your company.
Okay, thank you, Jim. American Models was actually founded by my husband, Ron Bashista, back in 1980 and continued until December 2021 when he went home to Gloryland. And when Ron started the company, he wanted to make a locomotive that he could walk out of the room, get a cup of coffee, and come back, and the locomotive would still be running. And Ron did accomplish that and made quality products. After he passed, I took over the company, and had a few rough edges right at first. But my manager, Joe Calamia, he's my right hand, and he and I work great together and help each other out every day. We're just strictly an S-gauge manufacturer located in Whitmore Lake, Michigan. And since Ron's passing, we have restocked many products that we needed for the company. And we found a person to do roadbed, which was no longer available before the COVID hit. So we did find a company and do now have roadbed.
Karen, can you turn your video on?
I'm not sure how to do that.
Phil, could you help her turn her video on?
Karen, do you have something across your camera? Do you have a like a lens cover? There you go.
There you are. There you are.
You know what? We have many products. We have several diesel locomotives and numerous road names. And we often when we get an order, we will build that locomotive from scratch. And that's from taking the zinc frame, taking all the flash off of it, painting it, and then they make gearboxes right from scratch with all the gears and put the wheel sets in them, and then they will assemble a power unit. And those power units can be either DC scale, DC high rail, or American Flyer high rail. And people who run DCC can actually tell us about that at their request, and we will put a plug in there so that they can run DCC. And the difference, I don't know if everybody knows the difference between scale and high rail, but scale has small flanges on the wheels that's prototypical. And high rail has a larger flange that will accommodate like the American Flyer track, Gargraves track, S Helper Service fast track, and then our code 148, which we can run both scale and high rail on. We make many, many products. We've probably got over 100,000 different products, and we make locomotives, passenger cars, 4-bay hoppers, 3-bay hoppies, 40-foot box cars, reefers, 50-foot box cars, gondolas, cabooses, covers for our gondolas. And we do have parts available for scale modelers who would like to repair their own products. And we also do repair locomotives. We get many locomotives back that people will call up and say they don't know how to fix them, so they send them in and we repair them for them. We paint and print many products, and we also do a lot of different cars for different club orders, different kind of cars. We've done box cars, tank cars. We're in the process right now of doing flat cars with trailers, various trailers. So we welcome, you know, Ron, when he had the company, he funded the company with, he did a lot of stock market trading. I unfortunately don't do stock market trading, so we depend on customers. But, you know,
And Karen, you also provide scale trucks. If people want to convert American Flyer or High Rail to scale, you provide trucks for them, right?
Absolutely, we do. Yeah, and we have trucks for all of our products. We're kind of low on our caboose trucks right now, but we've got Bettendorf roller bearing, you know, heavyweight passenger, Bud passenger trucks. Yeah. We get quite a few orders for those.
Well, again, I appreciate so much you being interested in sponsoring this segment on our show. I'm looking forward to working with you. And I appreciate you being here tonight to tell us and share with us a little bit about your company.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you so much, Karen. Anybody have any questions for Karen before she goes?
Yes. What on your website, you've got premium series, classic series, and standard series. What might be the difference in those?
People can order something that's just standard and it doesn't have like the handrails or windows or anything like that. The modeler just puts those in themselves. But now we're tending to make everything ready to run so that people can order a locomotive that's already assembled with the windows and the handrails and everything like that. So they just take it out in the box and put it on the track and go.
What about what's the other one? Premium and classic?
Some of the different paint schemes are premium. Depending on like, Suzy Q is one of them. Some of the other box cars and things like that, where there's more involved printing on it, are classics.
Okay. Thank you.
Karen, thank you so very much, and we'll see you again, I hope, on our show. But if not, then we'll watch your video that you're going to have made for us.
Hey, sounds good, Jim. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Karen. Well, now I want to turn to our next segment of HO modeling. And Gary Sherrill, NMRA, is the host for this. But I first want to run the Mainline Hobby Supply video, who is our sponsor for this segment of the show.
Mainline Hobby Supply is your one-stop store for model trains in G, O, S, HO, N and Z scales, including locomotives, rolling stock, track, train sets, and more to help build your model railroad. We are the largest model railroad shop in the area, and we carry a wide range of model railroad supplies across scales. Our friendly staff is always available to help with your modeling needs and to special order anything you may require. Mainline Hobby Supply is in southern Pennsylvania, halfway between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. We are only an hour away from Baltimore, and we are easy to get to from the 70, 81, 83, and 270 freeways. Plan to stop by on your next trip through Pennsylvania. Mainline Hobby Supply also has an online store that can cater to your modeling needs wherever you are located. With our large inventory, fixed shipping costs, friendly and knowledgeable service, and prompt shipping, consider Mainline Hobby Supply for your next online order. Use the QR code to access our online store.
Well, now I want to introduce Gary Sherrill, who is the host for this segment of our show. Gary, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Yes, sir.
Tonight we're going to take a look at a HO scale railroad. Just let me share screen here. And this is the railroad is called the Red Barrel Railroad. Now, the reason it's called the Red Barrel Railroad is if after you watch this video, you'll see that just about every building that you see on this railroad has a red barrel somewhere near it or right beside it. So I'll get this started. Okay. Now, this is a two-layer railroad. It has an upper layer and a bottom layer. And the railroad itself is the upper and the bottom do not connect. I'm going to start the video. And as you watch the video, I'm going to let you know. This is Casey Caceres Railroad. And Casey started building in 1972. It's in a room that is, it's a double deck layout. It's in a room that's 28 by 36 feet. He models CN, as you can see. The top level is 60 inches from the floor to the upper level. It has 6 main lines, 106 feet long. The upper level is 600 feet of track. And this will be part 1. Part 2 will be next month. All the buildings on the layout are scratch built, or he has 150 Campbell kits on this layout that he's built, plus other manufacturers. There are over 1,000 cars, 400 plus engines, which are mostly scratch built and custom painted. Casey got interested in model railroading at the age of 9 with an American Flyer train set, and he never looked back. So as you watch this, keep an eye out for the barrels. And this is pretty impressive layout.
Gary, is this still American Flyer?
He has his original American Flyer, but this is HO scale
Okay.
that he runs. He doesn't have an American Flyer layout.
Okay.
What is impressive about this layout is Casey's got just about every Campbell kit that was ever built. And he's got some even duplicates, plus other manufacturers that build sell kits. And he's done a lot of scratch building also on the layout. The one thing when I was videotaping this layout, I'm actually walking around with my iPad in my hand. That's why you see the odd strange movement. And the video lasts about 13 minutes. And by the time I was finished doing the upper level, my arms were pretty sore. So when I do it in the future, I'm going to design a little cart thing that I can attach the unit to, and then
Gary, is this in his basement?
this is in his
No idea how
basement.
big it is?
Yeah, the room is 28 feet wide and 36 feet long.
Well, it's a beautiful, I mean, he's just done some beautiful modeling.
It is a very beautiful layout. It's it's totally completed. Casey spends a lot of his time building. He'll find a locomotive that he likes, CN style locomotive, and he'll end up kit bashing or scratch building it. And then he custom paints it and puts it on his layout. He's got just about every locomotive that I think CN ever ran in the phase one period, the transition period.
That is something.
On the walls of his basement in this big room are all shelving. And all the shelving, you'll see it here as I move around, all the shelving is just full of either cars or locomotives. And Casey's very big on hooker cars. He has a huge collection of hooker cars, as you can see. Now, again, the locomotives you see, he's custom painted all of these.
Jerry, what is hooker cars? I'm not familiar
The
with.
tank cars. See the tank cars that we're looking at, the little stubby tank cars?
Yeah,
They're the orange cars.
yeah.
Yeah, those are hookers.
Hmm.
Hooker cars, and he really enjoys them.
Boy's got a bunch.
Yeah, it's a like the video doesn't do it justice. You have to go and walk into the room, and you're just totally amazed at what is there.
Oh gosh.
Gary, does he have a DCC system to run all this?
No, this is all done with DC. He, as I say, he has over 400 plus locomotives, and I think it would bankrupt him if he put DCC in each one of them. Now, as you can see it from some of his kits or buildings he's done. There's some derelict buildings on there that he's taken and made them into derelicts or burned out buildings, which is quite nice. Yeah, what you're looking at is the upper level, and the bottom level is just as impressive, but that'll be next month in part 2.
Do the two levels connect?
No, they're totally separate. The upper level is totally independent of the lower level, and he can run multiple trains on both levels all at the same time. I don't know why he didn't connect the two. I didn't ask him. Casey's a member of our Chatham Model Railroad Club, has been for a number of years. And he, as you can see, he is a beautiful modeler.
He really is.
Well, I think all the time it would take to build all those Campbell kits, who can fit in a helix if you're doing that?
Yeah. Yeah, he has built every Campbell kit that was on the market.
That's a lot of shingling.
You're right. I'm sorry there's no sound on part 2. There is sound because they're
Gary, how many years or how much time did it take him to build it?
He's been building this since 1972.
Jeez.
As I say, the upper level has over 600 feet of track. Lower level has 800 feet of track. Now, the number of automobiles that are on his layout, I have no idea. I don't even think
that was my next question, because
Yeah.
I've been trying to tell them, it's been long.
I don't even think he knows how many vehicles he has. And also, it's as you can see as we go through this, there are lots of people
Yeah.
and dinosaurs. You're looking at the dinosaur exotic area.
It's like a local petting zoo.
That little park down in Florida, just around I forget where it is. It's off the main highway that goes to Orlando, or not Orlando. Not terrible. Anyway, they have the dinosaur park, and you go in there and you can walk through, and I think that's what he modeled it after. ITLA buildings. Yeah, I must apologize. This is the lower level we're seeing. I thought I started with the upper, but I started with the lower. Now, if you look off in the distance, you can see some of the shelving and some of the equipment he does. He builds a lot of flat cars with very interesting loads.
Yeah. It's just beautiful modeling. Unbelievable.
So you can walk all the way around this, right? It's
You
sort
can
of
walk
freestanding in the middle.
Right, you can walk all the way around. And what's nice is when you go out to the outer wall, where I am now, there's actually he's built these this little bench that drops down so you can stand up and get up and get a nice view of the upper level. But this is the bottom of the, I'm sorry, we started with the bottom level first. And you can see the lighting underneath, which lights everything.
Yeah.
So everything that's on the bottom level here is all lit up. That's Casey. You can just standing over there. Here's the buildings. There's the interesting Labatt's truck. And he has the
Clydesdales there, I see.
Clydesdale
Yeah.
wagon and beer wagon. He's built a lot of Jordan. There's Jordan on here, City Classics, and a lot of other things. I noticed when I was going around, there's a couple of the vehicles I noticed that he had obtained for myself that I had built. And here we are back into the hooker cars. As they say, there's hooker cars everywhere.
Why do they call them hooker cars?
That was the name of them. It was the Hooker Company. I guess they transported oil,
Okay.
and he is really big on it. This should be coming up to the end. This is his turntable. As we see next week in part 2, this is the end. We'll see in July, the 10th, we'll have part 2. And there's actually in part 2, I asked him if we could run trains through it. And there's quite some interesting running equipment that you'll see on his layout. I'm not going to give away the surprise, but next month when you tune in, we'll be able to see something very, very interesting that runs around his layout.
Well, thank him so much for sharing this with us through you, because he's done a fantastic job. It's just no other way to put it.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. It is a beautiful layout, and it should be seen by as many people as possible.
Absolutely. Anybody have any questions for Gary?
Jim, Hooker was a chemical company.
Right.
So these were chemical cars.
Oh, okay.
I wonder if he ever has to clean track.
Out to what I was just thinking.
I've never asked him, but anytime we've been there, and Casey's been in the club for just as long as I have. And every time we go over, the trains run flawlessly. So I don't know what he does, but there's never stalling, there's never derailments. So it's
Gary, thanks so much. Gary, thanks so much for sharing it with us this evening. Look forward to seeing the rest of it next time.
July.
Yes, sir.
I thank you very much.
Well, now I want to turn to G-Scale modeling. And the sponsor for the G-Scale is New Creations Victorian Railroad Buildings, LLC, owned by Alan Rogers.
Welcome to New Creations Victorian Railroad Buildings, located in Bakersfield, California, 1 hour from the famed Tehachapi Loop. As part of building his model railroad layout, Alan Rogers took photos and made scale drawings of a number of buildings in the Southwest, many of which no longer exist. New Creations Victorian Railroad Buildings has turned these photos and drawings into kits with laser-cut wood, 3D printed components and detailed instructions. We produce kits in HO, O, S, N and G scales. Our O scale kits are compatible with Holiday Village dioramas. You can see our products at train shows or use the QR code to visit our website. We hope you will try our unique kits. They are easy and fun to build, even for beginners. You will enjoy the finished models for many years to come.
Thanks so much, Alan. Well, now I want to introduce Steve Bittinger, who is the host for our G-Scale segment. So Steve, welcome.
I got Mr. Sherrill on camera tonight here in the workshop. And 2 projects tonight for you.
Okay.
Both of them have to do with rail cars on the railroad. So all of us have plenty of freight cars, and empty freight cars don't make railroads any money. So we're going to talk about 2 types of loads that will be very typical in most railroads. And the very first one we're going to deal with starts with this right here. And this is good for garden railroading, right? But this plant is called autumn olive. It's an invasive species in West Virginia. We have 2 species, autumn olive and this thing called multiflora rose that started after World War II as a ground cover, became invasive. Now it's illegal. $1,500 fine if you grow this stuff anymore. So you don't want to be doing that. But this plant is what we're going to use for our first load. This is the green, the top of it. And if I show you the rest of it, here's what we're after. These pieces right here. Now, the autumn olive plant will get about 15 feet tall. And the base, the stems will be 2 inches. So we don't want those. We want these branches. And tonight, I'll tell you that this is good for any gauge. I don't care if you're H, there are for your product. It's just a matter of selecting the size branch that's appropriate for your car loads. So what we do with these is this stuff, when you cut it, is green, and it's gonna have a white sap that runs out of it. And the next process after cutting these, I have these in these lengths. You can get them down to whatever you like. I cut them either on a bandsaw, cut them on the table saw, chop saw, cut them on your hand saw, however you need to cut them. But what you want to do is we're going to cut them into two sides. We're going to look at these two right here. First of all, these for G-scale purposes are about 2 inches long. These are going to become pulpwood loads. And when they're on the pulpwood cars, pulpwood is double racked in the cars, end to end, just like that. So we're going to need a fair quantity of these things in about this length. The next ones we're going to cut are these little pieces right here. These are about 3/8 of an inch deep. Just one after another, cutting them off, cutting them off, cutting them off. Yes, and this takes quite a bit of time in G-scale, but it's something you do while you watch TV or listen to the radio. Once we've got a whole bunch of these guys made up, and this is what they're going to look like as they come off. You notice they're very white in color. This wood is quite light on the inside. The secret to these is...
Steve, can I interrupt you just 1 second? I apologize. Phil, could you put Steve up full screen and take me off of it so that we make sure we can see? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. I'm sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
Sure. Do you want me to go back or just keep going?
Why don't you keep going?
Okay, so these little pieces here, we've cut off of here, 3/8 of an inch in size. And because they're such a light color and they're wet, you could just let these lay around for a while and they would eventually dry out. But what I do is I cook these things. And so when nobody is looking in the kitchen, I sneak out and I get my wife's cookie sheet, just like this. And on the cookie sheet, a little piece of aluminum foil, because I'll get in trouble if I cook directly on her cookie sheet. And then we just simply put these guys on here like that, spread them out nice so the heat gets to them all the way around. We're going to put those in the oven if you have just a regular oven in the house, or better yet, I would recommend you go outside. When you cook these things, they sort of make an odor like burnt popcorn. And if you don't have a good exhaust system in your house, some members of your family may not appreciate that very much at all. So we're going to put them on the tray. We're going to set the oven to 350 degrees. And we're going to cook them for about 30 to 40 minutes. This size that I have here, this is like 30-minute cooking time. If you have little ones, if you're an HO, you can probably cut that down to 20 minutes. And if I try to hold these where you can see them, once we cook them, they are going to look very, very realistic to the rings in a tree. It's literally, you see every layer of growth right inside of them, typical of what a tree would look like. After they've cooked and they've cooled off a little bit, if they're still pushing out little bubbles of sap, stick them back in for about another 10 minutes. So when you're all done, take them out of the oven, salt them lightly, serve to your friends. I'm just kidding. Steve, you're all paying attention. Next thing, after we've done that, we're going to make this little box that I have right here. This is just some scrap plywood. Nail it together, little black paint on the back for the background. And we're going to use that, and that's what we're going to mount these little guys onto. And I'm going to tell you the secret to doing these. This will be the piece that's going to set upright on your car. I'm going to put these on a bulkhead flat. You're going to be sitting on there like that. This way, you're not making a solid load. The whole interior is a hollow core. All we're going to make, we're going to take our hot glue gun. We're going to start down here at the bottom. We're going to stick these on here just like this until we have filled up the entire thing. And you can just sort them out however you like. And we have done that all the way across, and eventually we'll get to the top. When we get to the top, we're going to take our other pieces, remember, our 2-inch jobs. They're going to go right on top here like this. And you're just going to alternate the lengths of them back and forth. Just like so, until you have covered the entire top of that car. Once you get this far along, one thing you will do is you may want to let these things hang over a little bit. You can always kind of sand off and trim the rough edges so they fit neatly into your car. So all said and done, when we get finished up, here we go. Here is this is a shorty bulkhead flat, same idea. And this is very convenient. We want to get the load off. There you go. All said and done. We look inside, as I told you before, hollow. When you want to make a loaded car, right back on top of the car, just like so. So that's everything you're going to need to make that. A little bit of autumn olive, some hot glue, the oven, some tin foil, and a little bit of time. It's a very inexpensive project, and your railroad gets to make some money with a good load of pulpwood going down the tracks. Interestingly enough, pulpwood cars, a lot of railroads have these. I'm a fan of the Western Maryland. Western Maryland hauled lots and lots of pulpwood to various paper mills and locations all over the railroad. These guys are real frequent on the railroad. Let me move on to our next one. Second revenue car we're going to do tonight starts with this board right here. And once before I told you all, every workshop has to have two things. There's a pocket knife and a table saw. So we're going to use both of those. We're going to take this board. This is a piece of 1x4 pine, spruce, anything, nice straight grain, not a bunch of knots in it. And what we're going to do with this piece is we are going to cut it on our saw in pieces this size. We're just going to go right across there, cutting this into a bunch of small pieces. When we get done with that, here's what we have. The reason we want to do that is because we're going to split the grain on these things with our pocket knife. We're going to literally make little pieces in this fashion all the way up the length of these things until we have lots of little pieces in this size. So we've gone from our board to these little 3/8 pieces to these. That's the progress, the order we're going in. This is what we're after, this piece right here, these pieces. We're going to make loads, wood chips for wood chip hoppers. Once we get into this size, we need to break them down into true chip size. So how do you go about breaking those down? For that, you need this very high-tech piece of equipment called a blender. This is my $3 blender. I got it at a yard sale. You're going to take your chips, put them in your blender. Doesn't matter how many. Make that thing half full, totally full, whatever you want. Get them in there like that. You're going to add 1 cup of water. Just like so. If you don't put the water in there, the little chips will be like a popcorn popper. They'll just be popping up and down all over the place. The water will suck them down into the blades. And as it pulls them down, the ones on the bottom pop up, the next ones will be sucked down to the bottom. When you get done blending these things, this thing's got like way too many settings on the side. I just pick one, turn it on, let it run until I see I've got them down to about the size that looks appropriate to my scale. You take them out, get that cookie sheet back out once again, spread them out, and I just set them out in the sun outside the workshop. And when I get done, there's what I have. This size right here, this material. This is what's going to become my hopper load. So, let's say a couple of days went by, and we dry them out. Now I gotta have something to mount those onto, and here we go, back to my recycled real estate signs, good old polycarbonate. I'm going to end up by using my little handy dandy form that I have made. And I'm putting just a piece of good old Glad saran wrap in there. That's what's going to keep everything from sticking to the sides. I'm going to put this in the bottom, like so. And once I get that in there, I use a mixture of whatever glue I have on hand. It doesn't matter. This happens to be Type Bond glue. You can use any old glue you have. 50% glue and about 50% water mixture. So we're going to take these. We're going to put them in our mold. We have this made up in an empty bottle. We're just going to squirt it, literally soaking it all over, saturating it really good. And I will tell you, I put a few drops of Dawn detergent in there with it. That helps act like an emulsifier and spreads it out across the load. So from this board to those chips is our goal. And when we get that all finished and done, here we see one of the loads into a chip hopper, into a high-rise Western Maryland chip hopper. So again, not much investment for what you're going to do, just mostly your time and a little bit of materials. That's it for tonight. Any questions, I'll be glad to answer for anybody.
I think that's fantastic. I think both of those loads are fantastic, and the way you did it, I think I could even do it.
Well,
Have you thought of using sawdust off of your table saw and all those other saws you use?
sawdust is too fine. Randy Maurer was up here in the last operating session. He had one with sawdust in. And he even commented that you can't detect sawdust. Looks like you have a load of sand in the car. It's too fine. You need this texture that we have here.
Maybe your scale's too big.
Steve, that's gorgeous work. Thank you so very much for sharing it with us tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Now I want to turn to Sherri Johnson, who is our technology guru and a professional engineer for our technology segment this evening. Sherri, welcome. Thank you.
Hello, Jim. Glad to be here. I'm actually at finally home this week, so hopefully I can operate this computer after I've been operating the other one for a few weeks. Let me get my screen shared here. And, all right, there we go. Okay. As you recall, last time we were here, we were discussing 3D modeling, which was the hard surface modeling, and we learned about wireframe, surface, and solid models. This week, we're going to discuss 3D sculpting or digital sculpting, which is used for creating organic and free-form design. It creates these things using meshes. Now, what is a mesh? This is a mesh, not a mess. Could be a mess, but it's a mesh. Meshes are basically, think of them as little tiny triangles. They have vertices where little points of the triangles come together. They have edges where they touch, and then they have the faces, which are the surface. You take a whole bunch of these and you put them together and you can create an object. Now, you can create a mesh object from scratch. Usually you start with a cube or a sphere. You can edit these meshes. There are tools that will allow you to move things around. You can move the faces, you can move those points, and you can move the edges where they touch. Other tools will let you make even more triangles so you can get greater detail, or remove the triangles to call what they call a low poly count. Basically, it's your polygons or your triangles, and it reduces the number of those. I don't know if y'all have seen some stuff, but basically it makes an object blocky. 3D sculpting lets you start with that base shape, whether it's a sphere or a square, and you work with it like you would clay. You actually have tools that are digital, but it allows you to push and pull and smooth and grab and pinch just like you would with modeling clay. And this is the fun with digital sculpting. You're not limited to shapes. You're limited to pushing and pulling and moving. And you can create all sorts of details, things that you couldn't do using the hard surface modeling that we discussed previously. You can also create what they call photorealistic and hyper-realistic results. Most of the software will let you paint your shapes and color them to the point that they actually look like they're a photograph. Fortunately, those objects would stay on your computer. You can't 3D print full color economically yet. Got a little demo here that basically shows one of these sculpting tools. And here you can see it's got a whole bunch of different primitives. They've got faces and animals and squares and circles and all sorts of shapes that you can start with. So if you were doing a person, you'd start with the figure. To show the tools, we're going to use just a basic single sphere. And I've kept the polygon high so you can actually see the little triangles as we start to move things around. And here we're basically pushing and moving and pulling just like you would if you were playing with clay. You have all sorts of brushes at your disposal. Not only can you change the size, but you can change the shape of the brush. That gives you more functionality when you're actually trying to sculpt those little tiny details. I call this kind of like the alien head, but not demonstration. And you can see we're just dragging and moving those little polygons around, and you can actually see the edges here. Like I said, we kept the count low so that you could actually see them being moved. Going in here and adding some more depth, creating some lines. You can do all this with your computer and a mouse. If you're going to really get serious about doing digital sculpting, I highly recommend a drafting board or a digital drawing board, like a Wacom tablet. Or if you actually have an iPad, you can set that up as a second display and use an Apple Pencil and use that as your drawing board, which is what I do, so that I can draw using the Apple Pencil. Smoothing, this is great. If you've ever gotten a scanned object and it's got all these bumps in it, the smoothing tool is great for smoothing surfaces. And doesn't that look like fun? Just push and pull and move. Now, there aren't a lot of dedicated sculpting tools out there, unlike the CAD world. Your leading one is ZBrush. They have actually 3 different levels, the full version, and then what they call the core, and then a mini version, which is free, that lets you do basic sculpting. It's great to start to learn. Mudbox, Autodesk raises its head again, is another one that's dedicated. And all these, as you can see, have annual subscriptions. Mesh Mixer, you can still download it, you can still use it, but Autodesk discontinued support for it, I think 2 years ago, which has made me sad because I use Mesh Mixer all the time. It's one of my go-to apps for fixing figures and animals and so forth. 3D Coat is a new one on the market, and I haven't really had a chance to play with it, but it is an international purchase. Now, we do have CAD software that we saw last time that also has sculpting capabilities. Blender, which is your tool that does everything, has a great sculpting tool. ShapeLab, which I really, really want to play with, but it's virtual reality sculpting, and I don't have one of those little Oculus masks yet to do that type of sculpting, but I think that would be fun because that's where you're actually getting to the point where you'd be using your fingers to push and pull to sculpt a model. Maya, AutoCAD, Modo, all of these have sculpting tools. SelfCAD has recently added a sculpting tool to it, and so has Cinema 4D. A lot of these do not have free versions. Blender's free, and the dedicated tools are free. And I don't know where my file just went. It just disappeared. Thank you, computer, for crashing. The last screen was actually showing some hints. Let me see if I can get that back up here. Okay, there we go. Actually, I guess I had 2 more slides. There are web-based and tablet-based sculpting tools. SculptGL is free. It's web-based, and I use it more than I use ZBrush because the ZBrush free version does not let you import anything you've created from another application. And since I usually start things in Tinkercad or Fusion and clean them up, I either bring them into MeshMixer or into the SculptGL. Nomad is actually a pad-based, and they have it for the iPad. They have it for your Android-based tablets. And for $19.99, it's a great app. And if you've got a stylus or whatever, it makes drawing really, really easy. It exports, and you can actually send it directly to some 3D print services. Forger used to be free, and Maxon bought them out, and they're actually the ones that bought out ZBrush that used to be Pixelogic. So Forger is also another cool one, but if you're just playing with this, play with the free ones. And I've got the links, and after this is over, I'll upload the PDF with active links so you can go check those out. The 3 favorites here, unique features, MeshMixer is referenced as the Swiss Army knife of 3D meshes. It can do anything. You can drag, drop, push, pull. You can actually take something that's been created someplace else, bring it in, break it down into individual pieces so that you can push and pull on an individual piece. I use this a lot when I do my figures. I'll bring my figures in, separate to the pieces so that I can work on like a coat or my shoes or doing a tie. I can separate it and actually use MeshMixer to do and work on those individual pieces. So a lot of them have to be exaggerated to get them to 3D print. ZBrush is the industry standard. It's used by movie studios. It's used all over the world. So many features. And the video that you saw was the actual ZBrush interface, so you can see how complicated the large app is. The free version has a lot of those tools, and I highly recommend playing with that. Again, we've got Blender because it's on there. It does, the modeling, the sculpting, the rendering. It does everything. Has a hard interface to learn, at least for me. But if you want an app that can do the hard surface modeling like we talked about last time, plus doing the sculpting, Blender is your tool to go for, and I recommend taking the time to learn how to use it. If I had done that 15 years ago when they first came out, that would probably be the only application I use today, but I didn't keep up with it, so now I use a group of applications. And then next week, we will discuss specialized programs for like creating figures and animals and all sorts of other things. Questions?
Well, you know my technological ability. So
Yes.
pick one program that I should start with, and which one would that be?
I would say start with the SculptGL, the free one, or the Nomad, which you could get on an iPad. And those are pretty much the easiest ones to start working with because you could get out your stylus or your fingers and just start making things with different shapes. Those are going to be your easiest. ZBrush is going to be your most complicated. So I would go with one of those 2. Like I said, the SculptGL, it's web-based, so you can get to it from anywhere. It's very easy to use. It still starts with a sphere, and you got the same tools with the push, pull, and drag, and all that sort of thing. Other questions?
And once I have made my figure or whatever I'm making, and I'm satisfied with it, then I can send it to a 3D printer and have it printed.
Yes. Yes, all these can export into the different formats that 3D printing utilizes, which we'll be discussing those when we get to 3D printing. But yes, it exports to OBJ and STL, which are the 2 big ones. So yes, though you can send them directly to a printer.
Anybody else have any questions for Sherri? Sherri, thank you so very much. I think I'm learning slowly but surely.
And most of these apps that we've talked about, Jim, just a little bit of work, and even you can do it with your limited technology. I promise.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, so now I'd like to turn to Tom York, if he's here. Did Tom make it? I know that he was not feeling well earlier, but I don't know whether he had made it or not. Tom, are you here? Then let me pass Tom for this evening. And Tom York, I know is Tom Farrell is here, but I want to pass on him tonight too, because Tom just underwent knee surgery and is still having a little difficulty getting upstairs where he does all of his modeling. So until he's able to climb those stairs, he's just going to have to relax and watch the show and not show us his great modeling ability. But hopefully in another couple of weeks, Tom will be back with us, and so will Tom York, and we'll get them straightened out at that point. So let me now turn to Greg Cassidy. And this is something that has been asked. I've been asked for, I can't tell you how many modelers have asked me about this. Tell me what paintbrushes to use and tell me how to keep them clean. And that's what Greg Cassidy is going to try to do for us.
Well, thank you, Jim. I didn't realize so many people were interested in it. I hope I do justice to it. Okay, let me bring this up. You should see it full screen, I hope.
Yes.
All right. Welcome to my clinic about paintbrushes. We'll be going over what brush options there are and how to care for them. I used to teach a course in community college about electronic page imposition and printing, but my students had to know how a bindery department worked before they could learn how to impose pages to be printed. So we spent the first week in bindery. We'll be doing the same here, so before we go into brushes, we'll cover two other subjects. The first is paint. What kind of paint will you be using? That will determine your brush choices. We can broadly classify paints into two types, water-based and solvent-based. All paints consist of at least three parts. Pigments, these are the finely ground particles that do not dissolve but are suspended in paint. There are two types of pigment, prime pigments and extender pigments. Prime pigments are those that contribute to both wet and dry color in paint. Extender pigments are lower cost pigments that give extra weight or bulk to the paint. Binders. These are ingredients that provide a binding effect that hold the pigments together to create a dry film on the surface. A paint's binder is the key ingredient that directly relates to a paint's performance, including adhesion, washability, fade resistance, or gloss retention. You can have oil-based binders and acrylic binders. The vehicle is the transport for the mix of the pigments and binders to travel from the bottle to your subject and then evaporate. These types of liquids differ depending on the type of paint. For oil-based and alkyd paints, the liquid is typically paint thinner or other type of solvent. For acrylic paints, the liquid is usually, but not always, water. And additives. Some paints have additives for specific properties the manufacturer wants the paint to have. This applies less to model paint than to some other types of paints. Paint is a liquid mixture of pigment and solvent. When dry, it forms a film-like layer. You can see here the ratios of the components of paint, made up of pigments, binders, liquids, and additives. On the left is solvent paint, usually a half-and-half ratio. Waterborne paint on the right is made up of more vehicle and less pigment. Water-based acrylic paints have a water vehicle and both thin and clean up with water. Water-based acrylic paints are the most popular type of paint used by modelers now. These paints are non-toxic, odorless, and dry very quickly, so you don't have to wait a long time between coats. There are painting techniques that are easier to do with acrylics, such as dry brushing. When using these paints, you can wash your brushes in water, so you don't need any special thinners to clean them with. Solvent-based acrylic paints. Several manufacturers of acrylic paint for modelers use an alcohol base or an acetone base instead of water. True Color and some Tamiya paints fall into this category. As these solvents evaporate faster than water, these paints dry even quicker than water-based acrylics. The downside is that these paints are generally thinner, so give less coverage, and the solvent in the fresh paint can damage paint underneath that is not fully cured, but they do spray nicely. Enamel paints were first designed for model kits and figures, making them a classic choice for hobbyists. These paints use an alkyd binder and acrylic resin to create a solvent with a petroleum base. Enamel paints have a strong vapor and smell similar to lacquer paints. You'll want to use them in a well-ventilated area. Enamel paints are the longest drying paint of all these options. The enamel uses a unique curing process to create a chemical change, ensuring the paint dries into a durable, hard shell compared to the other paint finishes. For decades, Flocal paints were a fixture of model railroading. They were the only paints many used from the 60s until their virtual demise when the original formula was discontinued. To say the loss of Flocal was significant to scale modeling would be an understatement. Because Flocal had such unique properties, it factored into many of the choices of how we went about constructing a model, mainly because it was durable and stuck to what you applied it to. You never had to worry about any type of masking material pulling it up, and it was impervious to all decal setting solutions. But for all its great qualities, Flocal had its own set of issues. At the top of the list was the health hazard of inhaling the fumes. The main component in Flocal was an organic compound known as xylene. Xylene was responsible for the characteristic smell of Flocal. Xylene was also a small component of lacquer thinners of the day. And while you could thin Flocal with lacquer thinner, the other components in lacquer thinner sometimes typically degraded the quality of the paint and ruined the shelf life, so you always wanted to thin with diasol. When painting with Flocal, it was essential for your health to work with extremely good ventilation. Polyscale. Tester Corporation announced in May 2013 that it would discontinue its Polyscale paint line, including its water-based acrylic paints, due to a changing modeling market. However, Tester continued to take orders from retailers and ship paint for a limited time, so there's still some out there. This paint is made with finely ground pigment and dries to a durable finish on plastic, resin, wood, and metal models. It can be brushed or airbrushed without obscuring surface details. Scale Coat 1 and Scale Coat 2 are specialized paints designed for use on different surfaces. Scale Coat 1 is formulated for use on brass, metal, and wood, while Scale Coat 2 is created specifically for plastic. Both paints dry to a high gloss finish, which allows decals to be applied directly without the need for a barrier. Scale Coat paints were available in both bottles and spray cans. Iron Horse Model Works is the new owner of Scale Coat. On their Facebook page, they say, "We now are the new home of Scale Coat model paint. The paint line will still be called Scale Coat, and nothing will change with the formulas of the paint." Oil paints. Oil paints and their less understood water-soluble cousins gouache are not a typical paint in modeling, but can be used for very effective weathering, rusting, and streaking. They can be simply applied and then streaked or spread around using mineral spirits or plain water in the case of gouache. Washes can be made in their simplest form, but there are many specialized ones on the market. Again, these are primarily used for weathering and in some cases just darkening a paint so it isn't quite so bright. Some are water-based and others are solvent-based, so be sure you know what you're getting. Now, second, what material will you be painting on? Some materials like brushes, and some are better being sprayed. By sprayed, I mean either with an airbrush or a rattle can. Plastics. You want to wash them first to get off the mold release. You should prime it first if using a brush. Spraying them often works better, but they can be brush painted. It largely depends on if you're painting a small detail or a whole boxcar or a building. Wood. This material loves to be brush painted. You can stain the wood before painting or afterward, or both. You shouldn't need to prime unless you're painting a G-scale structure to be placed outside all year. Then treat it like you would if painting your house. Metal. Again, size can matter. For larger items such as a locomotive or caboose, you'll want to prime and spray most likely. Smaller details like soft metal castings can be brush painted, but should be washed and primed first. Hydrocal. This is a very absorbent material and will take paints and stains well using a brush. Also, items such as Copic markers work very well with Hydrocal. And resin. It can be similar to plastic, but it's not the same. For small 3D printed items, wash and prime them first, and then you can brush paint them very nicely. But for cast resin, while it should be washed and primed, it may be better off being sprayed than brush painted. It really depends on the size and the detail. Okay, we've made it to brushes now. First and foremost, you need to choose the right brush for the job. The size and shape of the brush will depend on the size and shape of the area you want to paint. For small details and intricate parts, a fine-tipped brush such as an O or double O size is ideal. The smallest one that I use is a Winsor & Newton 4O. For larger areas, a flat brush or a round brush with a bigger tip is more appropriate. Brush shapes. Paintbrushes come in many different shapes and sizes. The shapes and sizes of the brushes you choose to work with will depend mainly on how large an item you want to work on and how detailed you need to get. Flat shapes are great for covering large areas with paint. A few of the most common brushes in the flat family are flat shaders, filberts, angular shaders, and stroke brushes. Round brushes are my most common brush to paint with. Smaller ones are perfect for detail work, and larger ones for general coverage. They come in various shapes and sizes such as round, linear, and mop. Specialty shapes are used for varying techniques. Such as fan shape, you can produce streaking with that. Brushes such as fan shape, dry brush, and stippling are just some of the specialty brushes. These are what I call ultra specialty brushes. There are many of these specialized brushes available. These that are shown are brushes sold to nail salons for doing fingernail art. They also work well for eyes and bridles or any other fine detail work. Natural versus synthetic. Natural hairs are generally used for oil paint and watercolor paint and are more expensive. Synthetic brushes usually work better with acrylics. Depending on the quality of the hair used in natural brushes, they can be prone to damage and do not work well with acrylic paint because the pH of acrylic paint is the opposite of that of the natural hairs. Synthetic brushes are cheaper and more durable than natural hair brushes as well. There are different qualities of synthetic hair. I like synthetic brushes from manufacturers such as Royal & Langnickel, Winsor & Newton, AK, and Army Painter. But I have a bunch of craft store brushes too. One test to see if your brushes can hold their shape is to wet them and bend the ends. This will sometimes tell you the quality of a brush. See on the right how some have popped right back up and others will stay bent until they're dry. I use those for applying stains where holding its shape doesn't usually matter. It's important to have a wide range of sizes and shapes of brushes. You can see here I have my 4O Winsor & Newton for extremely fine detail, some Army Painter dry brushes for doing dry brushing, some OK Craftsmart brushes for general use, some nice Royal & Langnickel for better use, some really nice AK for really nice work, some really cheap craft store brushes for when it doesn't matter, and a mixed lot of really good to so-so brushes. Now, when applying paint to your model, sometimes it can work better to use thin coats and build up the color gradually. This will help you achieve a more even finish and avoid any unsightly brush marks or streaks. It is also important to avoid applying too much pressure on the brush, as this can cause the paint to go on too thick and result in an uneven finish. Thinning your paint with water or a paint thinner can help you achieve a smoother finish. It also allows the paint to flow better, making it easier to apply with a brush. Be careful not to over-thin your paint, as this can affect the color and the coverage. I like to use Liquitex Flow Aid. Water sometimes has too much surface tension. You can also see I like to use a coffee lid for my palette. They're cheap and disposable. If every time you wash a brush, you leave a little bit of paint at the base of the bristles in that hard-to-reach bit near the ferrule, it'll gradually accumulate as dry paint, stiffen, and force the hairs apart. It's tedious to ensure all the paint is washed out thoroughly at the end of every painting session, but it's worth it, so try to. I used to use a small bowl with a brush puck for rinsing, but started using a rinse well, which I really like. Whatever you use, have it nearby and easy to keep clean water in. Having a sink near your workbrush is handy as well. I often use Masters brush cleaner or a Winsor & Newton cleaner, especially if you have loaded a lot of paint onto the brush so it's gotten down into that ferrule area. But you can use soap and water to deep clean your brushes. It's better than nothing. The tip of the handle is sturdier than the tip of the bristles, so if you want to store your brushes upright, put them in a container standing on the handles. Never leave your brush soaking brush down in anything. You'll come to regret that. Try out using a wet palette. It's a great tool for keeping your paint moist and workable, especially if you're mixing colors. It also helps to thin out your paint, making it easier to apply with the brush. You can either buy a wet palette or make one yourself by placing a wet paper towel in a Tupperware and covering it with parchment paper. I use it most when painting figures where I need to get shading, so I can mix a number of shades together using it. Alternatives to brushes. Copic markers are a brand of alcohol-based refillable markers with a fine brush at one end and a broad brush at the other. An oil brusher is a modeling product made by Ammo MIG that contains oil paint that's diluted to the right consistency and comes in a bottle with a brush attached to the cap. You can layer it on and thin this with mineral spirits. A micro brush is a single-use brush with a small tip that can be used for precise application in a variety of settings. So what are the best brushes for modeling? All of these. It's all about picking the right tool for the right job and keeping it in good shape. So that's it, Jim. I hope that answered most people's questions.
Well, if it didn't, they can always send you an email, Greg.
Yep.
But thank you so much for taking the time to do this evening. I really do appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions for Greg?
Could you go over again the details of the wet palette?
Yes. I got an Army Painter wet palette. What I like about it, you can put on a couple different colors, and because it's wet underneath, but it's sort of on a parchment type paper, you can mix them, but they don't bleed into each other. You can also, if you have a thick viscosity paint and acrylics, their viscosity can really vary. Putting it on a wet palette can thin it out some without introducing too much of water into it. So you can kind of pick and choose what the viscosity you want to work from. But you can also make one by, I've seen people put a wet paper towel in a Tupperware, put a piece of parchment paper over that. And some people that do it, like Army painters and figure painters, they do that because they'll mix up a certain color using 2 or 3 shades. And once you put a lid on it, because it's a damp environment, it'll maintain that paint for a few days. So you don't have to keep remixing it every time you go back to paint.
In fact, Greg, you know, that's how I found out about Army Painter, was from the military modelers, because they are really sold. I mean, some of the stuff that they do and the products that they use, a lot of model railroaders have never heard of them. I had never heard of many of them that they use until I started talking to some of those guys. Absolutely. So much of the technology has trickled down from military painters and figure painters because they don't have anything else to do but paint. You know, we get to run trains, so we have to
am I going to
Yeah.
paint today? Am I going to run trains today? But you know, all they have is painting. So they're developing this stuff.
They're doing a great job of it too.
Yes, they are.
Question?
Yes.
On the fine tip brushes, you mentioned the Winsor & Newton. One of the problems I have, because I do a lot of the figure painting, is the very tips will bend over time.
Mhm.
Is there any way to straighten them up so that they don't keep bending?
Yes, that Masters brush cleaner that I showed, and you can get it real cheap on Amazon or Dick Blick's or any place. After you rinse your brush out and get out as much paint as you can, put it through the brush cleaner, and it's almost like a very thin paste that gets on it. I'd say almost like a suntan type solution type of texture. And you can shape your brush and leave that on it. And it'll hold the shape. The only thing you have to remember to do is rinse your brush before you go to use it again.
Thank you. That's one of my biggest problems with painting. So thank you.
Yeah, and brushes do wear out sometimes. So, you know,
Yeah.
if it won't hold its shape, well, you know, then it's time to cut off some of it and you have a perfect stippling brush.
Greg, I
thank
just wanted to mention that I'm still kind of new at painting,
Mhm.
and it's helpful to have scraps around to practice on.
Oh, absolutely.
Even with the wet palette, or if you're just using paint right out of the jar, it helps to practice with stuff first.
It sure does. You're absolutely right. And especially if you have something that's similar material to what you're going to be painting on, because you might have a paint that has a certain viscosity and it would go on one type of material and it seems like it's working fine. Then you go to paint your model and all of a sudden it's blobbing up or it's too thin or something.
Right. And to do lots of practicing.
Yeah. Well, I think everything we do is practice, because we should always be getting better and better.
Greg, thanks so very much. I certainly appreciate everything that you've done this evening. And seriously, if anybody has any more questions, Greg, why don't you put your email in the chat?
Will do.
Greg will answer your email from you. I
Sure.
promise. Thanks, Greg. Well, now I want to turn to Martin Breckbiel, MMR, for his Scratchbuilding Corner. Martin, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Jim. Let's see if we can get things up. Okay, well, there we are. So, yeah, that was very interesting on the paint brushes and painting. And despite the fact I'm still using flow quill, and probably will be for another 10 to 12 years before I run out of it. So longer for polyscale. But it's very interesting to know how to, like I put in the chat, I've probably been doing it wrong for the last couple of decades, and maybe I'll learn to do it better now. Who knows? So it's time for a new project or a next project or something going forward into July. And I've done, 3 or 4 pieces of rolling stock in the last 2 or 3 months. So we're going to go back to structures for a while. Only because I've run out of room to work on scratchbuilding any rolling stock for a while. So I had a bag of rafters. Deerfield River Laser sent this bag of rafters when I bought something else from them. And this was in the bag saying, sort of like, here, do something with this. And it's been sitting on the back of my one bench for a year or 2, maybe longer, gathering dust, quite literally. So I thought, well, let's pull them out and go through the close box of miscellaneous windows and doors, which is where I throw leftovers from other projects. And so I have 2 of those windows, 2 of those windows, and a door and a frame. And the windows are all Grantline. That door, I'm not sure what it is, but I don't think it's Grantline because I've never seen a Grantline door in that color. They've done different types of colored styrene, but that color is not familiar to me. And it's not a Tichy door either. So Something unique that I had, but both Tichy and Grantline make something similar. Here's what the rafters look like. They're nice laser cut rafters, which saves you a lot of grief putting together rafters. And I can appreciate the convenience here. Rafters in a bag. The thing is, however, these rafters define width of the building. You can't have a building bigger than the rafters. It's a little smaller, but you can't go any bigger. And depth of the building, well, you can only space rafters out so far apart. You know, modern code is closer than old buildings, but you can stretch things around a little bit, but there are limits here. We cannot have a 50-foot deep building with 6 rafters. It's not going to happen unless I make new rafters, and I'm not inclined to do that. So what I have done here is to take the 2-end rafters, and I decided they're going to be exposed, sort of, stretch this building to its max limits, and I filled the gap in the holes in the rafter pieces with clapboard. This was a lot of fun, cutting these out and making them fit, but you know, you just trace it on the back, you know, trace it to the back of some clapboard and cut it out with a utility knife, and if you don't manage to lose any pieces of your fingers along the way, you get a nice piece that fits in pretty tightly. With a little bit of sanding, it'll drop into place. And of course, if you're not careful, it'll drop out on the other side. So I put a little piece of HO 1x stock on the back just to give it a little extra support. Now, these are glued around the perimeter, but I put this on the back just for insurance so they wouldn't fall out. And, you know, after you get the building completed and you poke the end and the piece falls onto the inside, you can't pick it up and put it back in. We're trying to avoid that from happening. Okay, so we have blanks for the front and back walls. Just clapboard with 3/32 square stock on the ends for the corners. Pretty straightforward stuff. Just slap this together with some goo and some CA, and there's the blanks for the front and back. The side walls are similar. These are going to get changed, however. Change the back wall to add a bump out, because a plain rectangular box or square box is boring. So we're going to add a bump out. So this is part of the original back wall, and this is part of the original back wall on the previous slide. We've got a window cut out for it now. Added 3/32 pieces on the ends. And this is our bump out in the back, which has another opening for a window. So this accounts for 2 of the 4 windows. Just a matter of putting it together now. And that's what it looks like after you put the parts together. And I had some bracing to stabilize it. My mistaken order of some balsa wood is getting put to good use as interior bracing material. Just because I wanted to keep this from not curling up on me and keeping it nice and flat. I added the balsa, and you can see from the inside, it's across the back and across the bottom to keep these 2 segments of the back wall into the same plane. So they're nice and flat. Nice thing about balsa is with tight bond glue, it sets up very, very quickly, and you can keep working on things. And there's what it looks like from the other side, the inside of the building, which will probably be we're never going to look at the inside of the building too much once we're done anyhow. And here are the 4 walls. So I said the side walls are kind of boring. Well, they are kind of boring. It's just a piece of clapboard, another piece of clapboard, different window opening on this side. Front has a matching window opening and an opening for the door. You just cut these out with the utility knife, working on a nice flat oak piece of wood, carefully using the utility knife so you don't cut yourself, preferably. And being also careful because it gets a little, whoops, wait a minute, what happened there? There we go. Yeah, my trackball has a extra control unit on it that I'm sometimes a little too touchy. You just have to be careful when you're cutting open something close to the edge so you don't break and fragment it off a piece of your clapboard. And if you do, it's not a big deal. That's what tight bond glue is for. You put it back together and don't worry about it and keep going. So there's what it looks around the back. And I've put balsa wood all the way around, top and bottom. Well, not in the front yet. And you can see I've laid out, this is where our rafters are going to go. And of course, the two that are filled in are going to go right here on this back wall. And we'll fill those in later. And that's where we're going to stop this week. We'll pick it up next month, because it will be next month when I'm back, I think.
Yes, it will.
Time flies when you're having fun building stuff. There you go.
Anybody have any questions for Martin? Martin, you're doing such a beautiful job. You really are.
Hey, Martin, are you going to stick around after the meeting's over?
Am I going to? It depends when the meeting's over and whether or not I'm conscious.
It should be over on time.
Well, okay. There's actually an end time.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Martin.
Sure.
Well, now I want to go to Steve Sherrill, who does our "What do you want to talk about" segment. So, Steve, what do you want to talk about?
Well, good evening, Jim, and everybody else. In my area, it's been excruciatingly hot, and it has sent me to the train room where I have air conditioning. I ran a lot of trains, but every once in a while I sit down at my chair and I think about maybe I should take this layout down or modify it. Do something dramatic. You know, I have no waterfront on my layout. Maybe I need a waterfront. Certainly, we have covered buildings on waterfronts. Tom has done a good job on that, and others. I don't have many bridges. Maybe I need to do some more bridges. I got plenty of mountains, though. Recently at Al Judy's show, I purchased 3 buildings that were completed. Nice builds from a modeler who had passed away. And so I brought those home. I selected these buildings because I thought they would go on my layout. But when I got home, I thought, well, you know, I've already got a nice building. Where am I going to put these other nice buildings? So, you know, sometimes getting something and doing something different just creates another problem for you. But I seem to have overcome a lot of those, and I've placed the buildings on, and I will look at them now for a couple of months and make sure that's where I want to keep them. I believe that many of us go through this same type of situation where maybe our interest in trains fluctuates up and down. You know, after a train show, we're kind of high on our model railroad, and then it kind of goes down when other things become more interesting. But when it's hot like this, and you can go in and run those trains in the air conditioning, you really can have a good time. I have a son-in-law who is very interested in trains. He's a master electrician, and he wants to build a layout, but does not have the room now. So, you know which way I'm going with him, micro layout. So maybe I can talk him into that. Hey, maybe I could even give him one and push him a little bit. But, you know, then I'll have to answer to my daughter if I push too hard. So I just, you know, we all face these type of decisions, as little as they really are. What are we going to do with our railroads? How do we have fun operating? How do we have communication with other modelers? You know, we're lucky we have this Zoom. We also have other forms of communication through our computers. We can communicate with people anywhere in the world now. I was talking to a modeler this morning, and Australia. The only problem with communicating with that part of the world, you don't know if it's night or day, Tuesday or Wednesday, you know. But all those things are overcome. But I think that, you know, we need some kind of a direction, I believe, in what we're doing with our trains. You know, I like to refer to people that I know that are doing something. Like, for instance, Greg is getting ready for an open house. He's encountering things that he has not completed in the past, and now he is correcting that. I'm sure there are other people in the same situation. When you make a commitment, you know, you find out that you have to put new scenery down. You have to put a tree here. You have to finish a building there. You know, you want to be ready when you have these open houses and people visiting. I was lucky to have Ian Fengus come to my house and visit. Now, you know, when you have people like that come to your layout, you're really concerned about, gee, is my layout any good? What's he going to think? You know, he's going to go back and see other people. But it really doesn't make any difference. We're all just modelers out here trying to have a good time. Some of us are very good. Some of us are great. I think it's wonderful that we have this Zoom, that we can all get together and share, you know, what we've learned, what we're learning, what we're going to learn. You know, I've been doing this for 70 some years now, and I'm just amazed at the development and the abilities that people have demonstrated. It's just gone where I could never realize. So I just when are other modelers experiencing this type of situation? I mean, you've got to have layouts that are pretty much finished. Do you ever think about changing parts, certain areas? Let me know what you think.
Yeah, Steve, you mentioned that I'm getting ready for an open house here. Our division is having a layout tour next month, and I agreed to be on it, even though I haven't really run my layout for 2 years. So I had a lot of cleaning to do, cleaning track, cleaning cobwebs, cleaning dust. And as I was doing all that, I ran into some areas that I had always planned to get to because they didn't look finished, but, you know, a layout's never really finished. But now I'm getting to some of those areas and finishing them off. I still have a lot of work to do, and it won't be done in time for the open house, but it got me started again.
Well, open houses are great, and really, you don't have to have your layouts finished or complete. In fact, people like to see what you're doing, what you're going to do. You know, when we have these open houses, you always talk about, well, you know, I'm going to be doing this shortly, and, you know, I'm going to be building that. And it's just a great time to show off what you do have and share with other modelers. Open houses, they do inspire you to do some work on your layout, which is good. You know, it's like somebody sticking you with a little pin in your butt and saying, let's get moving.
You can't. And what I'm hoping that comes from it is I'm going to be in the middle of putting down more landscaping that I never got around to doing. And so hopefully when people show up, I can get some more tips and some more ideas from them, because I won't be done with it.
and some of the landscaping you're going to put down is probably an improvement over the materials that you were going to put down.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I built it in the mid 90s, and yeah, they've made a lot of advances in many things since then.
Yeah, but you've got a nice layout. You know, the pictures that I've seen, maybe we'll see some more, but yeah, I mean, I just think that it's really great that you did volunteer. If you did, they may have drafted you, because they have a tendency to do that sometimes, you know, some of the divisions. But I just think that, you know, it's great to have that. You know, I actually communicated with Tom some today. We talked a little bit about Tom Farrell. I don't know whether he's, you know, can't communicate. Oh, hi, Tom. Okay.
Yeah.
Tom, I was always wondering about your layout, that how you designed it. You know, did you have a prototype railroad in mind?
No, the only thing I can say about my new layout is it's really building on the previous 7 I had from beginning as a child, and I just have a different approach to layout design. A lot of people go to great detail to determine where turnouts and towns and switches. I basically wanted a maximum 24-inch reach. It's something I learned, sort of like a modular type reach to it. So I'm not contorting 48 inches across to get to trains. So I just had these basic parameters and, created the bench work first, and then I fit the trains to the bench work, which is complete opposite what most people do, and the scenery too. What I did want to say is I had this epiphany today after talking to you this morning. I was online and I saw a fall themed layout, with the red and yellows and the oranges. And I'd already planned tentatively to have a winter scene on my layout in the mountain area. And the axiom, my railroad, my rules, I determined the other half of my layout is going to be the autumn, the fall, and separating the autumn and fall is going to be a winter scene, which is not quite in the order of things, but again, my railroad, my rules. So, but I am going to feature, probably won't happen until the other side of the layout for at least another year, but in my head, it's going to be the fall scene. So sometimes it's good. I've taken a 9-day leave of being in the train room because of my replacement knee. And it's given me a lot to just sit around and think about, and talking to guys like Steve is fun when you're on the couch all day. It's good to broaden your horizons with other opinions, so anyway, I don't mean to ramble.
No, I want you to talk because, you're an outstanding modeler, and I treasure, what you have to say. I think that there's a lot of new modelers out there who kind of follow what some of the more experienced and better modelers, their input. I know we can look back and see some of the great modelers in our day many years ago, and we kind of, try to follow some of their stuff that they had. I always think, well, what would their layouts be like today? Would it be as good as the ones we have? Would it be better? Would they, just where would they be in the modeling world? And you can think any one of the famous people that is well known, and you can ask that question. I've always wondered what it would be like to see what their layouts would look like today. I can look at some of the layouts that from the past greats, and they're very impressive, and you could learn a lot from
them. Well, I think, for example, what Greg Cassidy is going to do, I hadn't realized that his layout was originally constructed in the 90s, but the opportunity to go back and refresh or update or finish areas. I mean, I joke with Jim Kello that these I did over 50 shows, and but these shows drive me to get work completed and move the railroad along. And sometimes if you don't have a week or 2 week pause, you don't dream up that the other side of the layout would be kind of neat if it was the autumn scene, or in Greg's case, he's looking at it with open eyes that, he hadn't seen certain areas. It's such detail for 20 years, and now he's got a impetus to get his layout up, in his mind, up to speed or presentable in his, to the degree that he wants to now. So, deadlines deadlines are good sometimes, and you don't need to, go ahead.
Well, Greg actually had Western Maryland as a prototype railroad to kind of get some input from. And he lived in that area where he could visit that area and see some of the real life scenes. So that is a tremendous advantage. He had prototype lettering he could use, prototype buildings, he could scratch build. I freelance everything. So I have to copy or pick up, bits and pieces from what I like.
Well, you know what, Steve? It's funny you mentioned that, because one of my updates that I just did last night, when I built the layout, it was supposed to represent the area Western Maryland went through Hancock, in the Maryland area. And there was a big orchard area, lots of fruit, mostly apples. And so the first thing I put on my layout was a warehouse and a cooling house for apples to be delivered to. But I just made up a name on it. I put, I think, Allegheny Apple Company or something, because, I hadn't done much research. This was all new to me. Well, I've hated that sign every time I look at it, because it's just generic and it doesn't really set the area. So I went online a couple days ago, did some research, found out that there was an Andrew Cohill that really brought together all the orchards in the Hancock area and made it into one of the largest fruit producing and especially apple producing areas in the Mid-Atlantic. And he had a big cooling house that everything was brought to. So I made a new sign, A. Cohill Cooling House, Hancock, Maryland, put that on the building. It actually follows the pattern of one of his billboards. And so now I feel a lot better, because I actually planted that scene by something that I had researched, instead of before, when I didn't really know much about what I wanted to have done. And I just made up a name.
Yeah. I used to go through Hancock practically every week. My parents moved to Berkeley Springs in the 60s. And so the only way to get there, of course, was either Road 9, or later on you got 70. But you had to go, across the bridge and past the sand mine and up that way. And of course, the sand mine had that little, I think it was an 18-inch or 2-foot railroad that ran down into the pits and hauled the sand out.
Yep, all the sand to make the glass.
That's right, the glass factory. And so I got the stations and stuff down in there in Berkeley Springs. So, it was kind of nice to do that. I didn't want to model that part, though. I was more southern part of West Virginia, 1947, where there was more mountains and tree-covered hillsides. I thought that was what I wanted. And I could also see that in Maryland when it went across the bridge at Harper's Ferry. So,
you see the view from 10,000 feet on model railroading that we need to remind ourselves of is look how dynamic this hobby can be, where you can go off into prototypical. If you have a railroad that's just my railroad, my rules, at any time I can go back and say, okay, I'm going to change all my goofy signs from Gilligan's Island to real names. You have the ability to change your railroad and update it at any time you like, and you can go down prototypical modeling ideas. You can look at the only layouts I used to see were layouts that I would see at these big shows like in Indianapolis or Pittsburgh or Chicago. But the new dynamic for me is visiting home layouts. It's, you pick up ideas that, I hadn't thought of that before. You take a quick photo, file that away. It's just such a dynamic hobby. And that's the message we need to get out to young and old modelers, that it's not a static hobby. It's a dynamic hobby in any direction you want to take it. And, having these little conversations like with you this morning, Steve, I mean, that's the wonderful aspect that is, I believe, unlike any other hobby. Because we're very fortunate to have these members and these, these resources at our disposal. Yeah. So those are my
you're correct there, Tom. I think that when you talk to modelers who don't have layouts, and they don't know really, they have a direction, but they're really not sure. And as a more experienced modeler, I can certainly tell them some of the pluses and minuses in layout construction, what works for me. When you get to be 70 years old, reaching over 24 inches, ooh, that hurts back.
That's exactly what I was talking about.
What you build at 50 hurts like hell at 70. Yeah. So, and those are things you can just share with the young, But yeah. I have noticed that there does seem to be some younger modelers coming up, and that's really good to see, I think.
Well, the converse is the younger modelers. As soon as I get things under control with my layout, I fully intend to get invested in 3D printing, just to fool around with it. There's a lot of people think this is, one of the big futures of the hobby, and I embrace that as well. And like I said, it's just such a dynamic hobby. You can go off any direction you want. That's the message we need to get out there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, listen, guys, I hate to do this, but we've got to kind of close it up so that we can do the after show before Martin goes to bed on us.
Right. Talk to you next week.
So, Steve, thank you so very much for doing this again this evening. Your segments are so popular. And the reason why is you just start a great discussion every week. So thank you so much for doing it. Well, Phil, if we could do the caboose for the end of the show, please, sir. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope you enjoyed the show. Most importantly, I hope you learned something. That's what it's all about. Until next week, best of modeling to you.